Hello, I'm Langston. I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting, and I've been gone for a hot minute. So before I get into this video about the 2024 Senate election predictions, my third edition of this video, I'm going to be asking you guys to please go watch my podcast. I talked about one of the most of the very important American topics going on in the country from numerous different perspectives, Democrat and Republican. And I think that it's very interesting for you guys to watch. So it's the video right before this one. Please make sure to tune into that. I feel like that video did not get as much love as it could potentially get. And I'd love for you guys to check it out. And, I guess while you're at work or at the gym, just put in your headphones and listen to it. So thank you guys so much for, checking that out for the ones that do that. So I'm going to be diving straight into this video. So I already went ahead and filled out the safe states for Democrats and Republicans. And obviously, some of these states are arguable, like, for example, Minnesota and New Mexico, as well as Maine, could obviously fall under being likely for Democrats, potentially maybe Connecticut or Delaware as well. And for Republicans, we could see Utah, Nebraska, Indiana, or Mississippi fall as likely, as well as West Virginia. But realistically, I think all those states will be more than 15 points for their respective parties. In West Virginia, Democrats do hold the incumbency, but West Virginia is a state that Donald Trump won by, I want to say, roughly 40 points. And I just don't think Joe Manchin would do 25 points better than Joe Biden. Like, he has to do 25 points better just to make the state even likely. So with that, I do expect Republicans to probably win this race by more than 20 points. We've seen numerous Democratic incumbents in state Republican states go down by almost a safe margin in a midterm election, let alone a presidential election with less split ticket voting. So again, I know people might disagree with that, but I do expect him to lose by more than 15 points. So now I'm going to move on to the likely states. I'm going to move on to likely states for Republicans, and we have two. Those states are Missouri and Florida. I don't have any changes from my last video roughly 2 months ago. In Missouri, Josh Hawley is the incumbent Republican, and I do expect him to, struggle somewhat with college-educated voters. In Missouri is more Democratic down ballot, especially in the rural areas and the working class areas. These areas are still turning Republican, but they're still more Democratic down ballot than they are, on a federal level. And that does help Democrats to an extent. Obviously, Trump being on the ballot will definitely help Republicans with rural turnout. And this race won't really be competitive. But this is a state that Donald Trump might not win by 15 points, or he might barely win by more than 15 points. And I do expect Josh Hawley to underperform him. In Florida, I kind of have a controversial opinion about Florida. I don't think Florida is as right trending as people make it out to be. Like, I think that Florida, as well as Michigan, are, states that are not out of reach for their respective parties. Like, I think that Democrats can lose in Michigan, and I think Republicans can lose in Florida. I definitely think Republicans have an advantage in Florida. But as of now, like, I think Florida is trending right, but I don't think it's trending right as fast as people are making it out to be. I just think that bad turnout leads to different results. So with that, I do expect for Rick Scott, who is the incumbent Republican in Florida, to win by a pretty sizable margin. I expect him to do pretty well with Hispanic Latino voters in Southern Florida, relative to his past performances, as well as do really well with working class and rural white voters, which is something that you've seen as of recently, especially in the era of Trump. And I think that I will give him roughly a 4 to 6 point margin in the state of Florida. But I could see this race being more competitive. I think Florida will be closer than people expect going into 2024. So I'm going to be doing the likely states for Democrats. And as of now, I have three likely states. Those are Virginia, Pennsylvania, as well as New Jersey. So in New Jersey, it's been a lot of drama, obviously, with Bob Menendez being indicted. And he is unlikely to be the Democratic nominee, in my opinion. If he is the Democratic nominee, I can see this race being lean. I think that I could actually see it, not really changing that much. Like, I think that voters would still vote for him just because, it is a Democrat in New Jersey. But, he could struggle with some of the, more independents, depending if who Republicans put up. If they put up like a right-wing candidate, obviously. But I definitely think that, this race could be somewhat, for at least New Jersey, somewhat competitive, similar to Missouri. But I do expect him to win by a pretty sizable margin if he is a nominee. If it's not him, I will move this race probably up to safe or a very high likely margin. In Virginia, um, I do expect for Tim Kaine to win Virginia by a pretty sizable margin. I think that Tim Kaine is a very strong candidate for college-educated voters, for suburban voters. I do think that, there could be some black turnout problems, which is something that did cost Democrats a lot in 2021. Two of the main things that have been happening is, Democrats have really been struggling with their appeal to black voters. And, um, there's many articles about this. Like, Democrats are really afraid of bad black turnout going into 2024. And, because of that, as well as, their struggles with youth turnout, the polls have been somewhat looking pretty good for Donald Trump. I do think that some of this shit is bullshit. Like, you're seeing polls with Donald Trump winning like 25% of the black vote, polls of him, winning the youth vote. That's crazy. But I definitely think that you could see some major turnout issues for Joe Biden, and that would cost him reelection. So with that, in states like Virginia and Pennsylvania, that will have a huge impact. In Virginia, I definitely think that it would hurt Democrats' margins, but they would still be able to hold on by a pretty sizable margin, at least in a presidential race. Obviously, in a local race like 2021, yes, but in a more presidential race, there will still be more of those voters voting relative to 2021, and that would definitely give Democrats a sizable advantage. With Trump being on a ballot, he will help Republicans out in the rural areas. But regardless, Democrats would probably hold on to roughly a 7 to 12 point margin in Virginia. In Pennsylvania, very similar thing. I can see Joe Biden losing Pennsylvania, but Bob Casey Jr., I think he has a lot of appeal to the white working class, and I definitely think that he will do pretty bad with the white working class compared to his last election with Trumping on the ballot, which is how these voters have shifted right in general. But he will still outrun Joe Biden probably by like 4 to 5 points in these counties. Maybe a little bit more than that, and that makes a big difference. I think that a lot of these voters in the suburbs that will still vote for Donald Trump just because of party loyalty. They won't vote for you know, down ballot Republicans as we've seen in other races like Doug Mastriano and numerous others. So I think that he'll do really well in the suburbs. I think that he will do a little bit better than Joe Biden with the working class. And, there might be black turnout problems in Philadelphia and et cetera. But regardless, like he should be able to hold on, in my opinion, by a pretty sizable margin. It could go down to lean if things get really bad for Joe Biden. But in my opinion, he will win by a pretty comfortable margin. So those are all the likely states I have for both parties. Now I'm going to move on to the lean states. So for Republicans, we have two lean states. For Democrats, we have three. So I'm going to go to the Democrats first. We're going to have Nevada, Arizona, and Wisconsin. And for Republicans, we have Texas and Ohio, and this gives Republicans the Senate. So in Nevada, uh, I expect for Jackie Rosen to blow her Republican opponent out the water. I don't think Jackie Rosen is too strong of a candidate, but I think that she's running in the right year, and she, has a lot of things going right for her. I expect for turnout to be much better with Hispanic Latino voters relative to 2022. And, of all the demographic groups Joe Biden's struggling with, I expect for him to do pretty well with Hispanic voters. Hispanic voters have a history of turning to incumbents. And as I said in my video, in 2004, after 9/11, after the Iraq War, these voters still trended to George W. Bush. In 2012, when the economy was not in good shape, with Obama doing practically worse with every demographic group except for maybe black voters and a couple others in 2012, Hispanic voters still trended to Democrats. In 2020, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, despite the Black Lives Matter movement, Hispanic voters still trended to Donald Trump. Like these voters trend to the incumbent regardless of the circumstances. It's something that we saw even with Steve Sisolak in Nevada and Terry McAuliffe in Virginia and Phil Murphy in New Jersey. Like these Hispanic voters did break more for them than they broke for them previously. And that's something that people don't really talk about. So in my opinion, I do expect for Democrats to improve there with those voters. And I've heard Republicans make some bullshit arguments like, "Oh, well, there's been Republicans from California moving to Nevada." Okay, and like, you think those overpower 4 years of minority majority immigration, as well as 4 years of you know POC dominated demographic groups, as well as younger voters be turning 18 and older white voters dying. So again, like the electorate in Nevada is a lot more Democratic than it was 4 years ago, just because of demographic changes, and that will help Democrats. The key in Nevada will be turnout. Like you've heard Republicans make the argument, well, oh well, the turnout was really bad in the rural areas, as if there's only like 20 people to live in the rural areas in Nevada. Turnout was really bad in Las Vegas. And yes, Catherine Cortez Masto, she did a lot better with the voters that showed up than Joe Biden. But regardless, like, turnout was really bad in Las Vegas and Democrats still held on. So again, with that, with better turnout in Las Vegas and with Reno continuing to trend to the left, and a Republican doing worse than Donald Trump in the rural areas just because they're not Trump and they won't get that Trump effect, Trump will definitely help them. Republicans could potentially even lose Nevada by more than 5 points. In Arizona, um, number one, Ruben Gallego is a very strong candidate for Arizona demographically. A lot of similarities between him and Catherine Cortez Masto, a candidate, who only held on because of her strong appeal to Hispanic Latino voters. I don't expect Kristen Sinema to run in this race. I think that why would she, do some shit like that? She knows she's gonna lose. Like, why would she waste her, go out like that? So in my opinion, I think that, she will not run. Even if she does run, I think even if she does run, I think it will benefit Democrats. I mentioned this. I don't see any Democrats really voting for Kristen Sinema. Like, Democrats vote for more left wing candidates. The problem Democrats have, for the most part, is that Democrats are not left wing enough. They don't have their beef with Joe Biden is he's not doing enough for student loans. He's not doing enough for black people. He's not doing enough, more left wing, issues. It's not about, voting for someone to center right that disagrees with his agenda that they even think is too right wing. So again, like she does not really have that much appeal to any of the demographic groups in Arizona on the Democratic side, which is why she's more popular amongst Republicans and Democrats. But where she hurts is with moderate Republicans because these moderate Republicans, they hate Donald Trump. And a lot of them just suck it up and vote for him because he, is party line ideology, like I mentioned in Pennsylvania. So again, like, yeah, less of them are voting for Republicans every year. It's still hundreds of thousands in Arizona that are. So again, like she would take away a lot of those voters from a Republican counterpart, and Democrats would barely lose any voters to her. So because of that, she would hurt Republicans even more than them just facing off because Republicans could keep all of those moderate Republican voters who won't vote for Democrats regardless. And I do hear people saying, oh, well, I think that Carrie Lake is a better candidate than Blake Masters. I disagree. I think they're both horrible candidates. I don't think Carrie Lake is a better candidate than Blake Masters. Yes, she outperformed him, but she's up against an incredibly weak candidate in Katie Hobbs. And Blake Masters was up against a very popular incumbent. So, they had much different opponents. I think if she would have been up against Mark Kelly, she would have performed a lot worse. So again, like I think that whoever Republicans run in Arizona, unless it's a traditional conservative, they don't realistically have a chance. At least in Arizona, and even with a traditional conservative, I still think they'll go down. Just because of Trump being on the ballot and just because Mark Kelly's an incumbent, like that traditional conservative stuff is not shifting the suburbs back kind of used to anymore. Like that, those days are gone for Republicans. So in my opinion, Arizona is not really in reach. Now moving on to Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, I think that Tammy Baldwin, in my opinion, I think that she will win this race pretty easily. You go back to 2022, Democrats performed pretty well in Wisconsin, especially for the circumstances. You had Mandela Barnes, who got outraised 3-1 against a Republican incumbent, who still held his ground pretty substantially. Now there are some warning signs about this that Democrats should look for in a presidential race. But Tammy Baldwin, similar to Bob Casey Jr., I expect her to do better with voters in the suburbs. I expect her to do really well in Waukesha County, Ozaukee County. Like she will get pretty good numbers here. Like I think that she'll probably get in the low 40s in Waukesha. Like she'll probably only lose Ozaki by maybe 5 or 6 points. She'll put a pretty sizable dent in Washington County. She'll really bring out a lot of voters in Madison. Um, yeah, and she'll do a little bit better than Biden with the white working class. Like I think she'll do a lot worse than she did last time, but she will still outrun Joe Biden by a couple points. I do think Democrats will probably struggle with black turnout in Milwaukee, and that might cost Joe Biden Wisconsin. But in my opinion, I think that she will hold on. I could see if things get really bad, similar to Pennsylvania with turnout, that it could go down a tilt. But in my opinion, I think Tammy Baldwin's a strong enough candidate to hold on by a pretty sizable margin. So in Texas and Ohio, I think that in Texas, I do expect for Republicans to win this race by probably 1 to 3 points. Ted Cruz, the incumbent Republican, I do think he will struggle in the suburbs as well as do a little bit worse than Donald Trump in the rural areas just because they're not having the Trump effect. Donald Trump will help Ted Cruz out a lot in these rural areas. Like he'll bring out a lot of rural voters. I think that Ted Cruz might do a little bit better than Trump in the suburbs or exactly the same. I do definitely think that he'll lose Collin County. He'll probably lose Tarrant by roughly 5 or more. I could see him barely holding on in Denton or losing Denton. I think that voters in Austin will come out in full force against him. I think that he'll, really expedite some of the trends in Houston and do pretty bad in San Antonio. And Democrats will definitely improve in the Rio Grande Valley, the same way you saw Better Work do. And in El Paso, like Democrats will do decent. They're really struggling with turnout here. The problem for Democrats in Texas, is the fact that like for Colin Odred, like turnout in Houston, turnout in Dallas, turnout in San Antonio is just not good. It's not good. I don't think people really talk about it enough. And, Hispanic voters make up like 40% of Texas population, only make up like 24, 25% of the electorate. Like if Democrats can get up the share of the electorate being Hispanic, they would dominate in the Southwest and especially in Texas. That's something they should really focus on. And in my opinion, they just don't have the numbers to flip Texas, in my opinion. I think they will come close, but coming close and winning are two very different concepts. So I definitely expect Republicans to hold on in Texas by, a lean margin. In Ohio, I expect Sherrod Brown to lose probably by, in my opinion, maybe 2 to 4 points. I can see it even being likely a margin at this point, especially with the black turnout issues that you see people talking about. So earlier this, roughly a month ago, we saw that special election in Ohio about abortion. Democrats dominated, but that was a special election that Trump was not on the ballot. He was not on the ballot to juice up rural turnout. People need to stop using these special elections as an indicator because, in the special elections in 2017 and 2018, like in the midterm, Democrats dominated. In 2020 came around, they barely won. So again, like that not have a major impact on Donald Trump, in 2020. So with that, I do expect Donald Trump to do really well in working class areas, do really well in the rural areas. And I think that will, have a down ballot effect. Like, yes, Sherrod Brown, he's going to outrun Joe Biden in these working class areas. He's going to outrun him. But, he's not going to outrun him by enough to put a substantial dent in the state, especially considering that Trump won Ohio by 500,000 votes. So again, like, he just won't do it, especially when you're seeing Democrats are struggling with black turnout. Like if he can't even turn out these voters in Cleveland and Columbus, in Cincinnati and Dayton and Youngstown, like he doesn't even have a chance to get off the ground. I think that he will do pretty well in the suburbs. I can see him winning Delaware County probably. Like I think he'll do really well in the suburbs. But I think he'll do pretty decent in working class areas. I think that he'll do a little bit better than Joe Biden in the suburbs. I don't think he'll do substantially better than Joe Biden in the suburbs, and that's a problem. He needs to substantially outrun Joe Biden in the suburbs, and I don't think he'll do that, as well as do well with black turnout, especially when Joe Biden might struggle with it himself. So because of that, I realistically don't see Sherrod Brown realistically having too much of a chance of winning. I know a lot of people have him winning, but mathematically, with Democrats and their black turnout problems, with Trump on the ballot, and him not being that strong with suburban candidate, like every time he's been in races, he did not outperform Joe Biden by that much in the suburbs in 2018 in the blue wave years. So like Joe Biden is the best performing candidate in the suburbs, and he still lost by 8. So with that, I could see Ohio turning to the left if Democrats can get black turnout up, if they can continue their gains in the suburbs. But in my opinion, that just would not be the case, and you could see Democrats even lose Ohio by double digits in the presidential race. So that's Ohio. So there's two last states on this list I want to talk about. So obviously, a lot of people are confused why I have Michigan as tilt, but I'm gonna, be going into it. So the last two states I'm gonna be categorizing. So I'm gonna categorize Michigan as tilt for Democrats. And I know that's kind of shocking because people have, Michigan as a sure Democratic race, but I kind of disagree with that, and like for some of the reasons I mentioned. So if you go back to 2020 and the Senate elections, you'll see that Gary Peters only won Michigan by roughly 1.7 points is a very narrow margin. And, he lost Kent County, which is where the suburbs was, a very suburban county has been turning to the left. He really didn't outrun Hillary Clinton anywhere. Like, he got Hillary Clinton numbers across the state. He did a little bit better in the working class areas than Joe Biden, which Hillary Clinton did as well. But he still did really bad, in the working class areas. He did not perform that well. And, the working class areas, they don't give Democrats that many votes. And, with Trump being on the ballot, he was able to help John James in these rural areas. And that is something that, Trump could realistically do. And I think that Alyssa Slotkin is a very bad candidate. I don't think people really talk about it. I think that she's pretty decent in working class areas, but you realize Trump's going to be on the ballot. So that's just not going to really matter. Like those voters are not going to vote for you because Trump's going to be on the ballot. And those just like Sherrod Brown and Bob Casey Jr. and Tammy Baldwin, like they're going to vote Republican down ballot. So that's not going to help her too much. And, as we saw, like Democrats do worse in the suburbs down ballot. And with, Democrats having the black turnout problems they have, like that could realistically cause them to lose in Michigan. Considering that black turnout was through the roof in 2020 and Gary Peters barely held on. So again, like when you're looking at that, like there is a lot of warning signs for Alyssa Slotkin. And I do think that Jim Clyburn has stuff up his sleeve. It's like I think that similar to what you saw him do in Wisconsin in 2022, as well as many other races, like where he's interfered. I definitely think that Democrats have a plan to get rid of Alyssa Slotkin, but Alyssa Slotkin is not a good candidate. And I think people need to see the writing on the wall. She's a very bad candidate for Black voters. She's not a strong suburban candidate, and she's going to do bad in the working class areas just because Trump's going to be on the ballot. So because of that, like she is not a candidate Democrats should be trying to put up. So, and you actually look here, like for example, Gary Peters got 582,000 votes in Wayne County. That was significant, considering that Hillary Clinton only got 519,000. So, that basically alone carried him. Like that really carried him in Michigan. But, if you actually look back and you see, like, yeah, that's a substantial increase. But if you actually look back in 2020 in a presidential race, you see Joe Biden got 597,000 votes. So he got 15,000 less votes in Wayne County. Like what you see is black voters already don't vote down ballot. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you go back to 2016, Hillary Clinton only lost Michigan by 10,000 votes. So those 15,000 voters that did not vote down ballot in Wayne County would have been enough to put Hillary Clinton over the top. So when you're talking about the fact that she's already going to underperform Joe Biden in these urban areas in Michigan, she's going to underperform him in all of these areas. She's going to do worse in the suburbs just because the suburbs are more Republican down ballot. She's going to struggle in the rural areas. And we're talking about a scenario where Joe Biden might not even win Michigan by that much. She could realistically come up short in Michigan. I don't think people really talk about it. I definitely expect Democrats to win Michigan, probably by a little bit under a point, maybe a little bit more than a point. But I think that Michigan is a realistic pickup opportunity for Republicans if they play their cards right, if they allow Joe Biden's coalition to sit up here and collapse in front of his face. In Montana, I expect for Republicans to flip this race. I had Democrats winning my last two cycles, but I do expect Republicans to win here. I think Trump's gains with working class voters, with rural voters, that will be enough to um, take Democrats down in this race. I think John Tester will go down with better rural turnout, with better working class turnout. A lot of these working class rural voters being fired up and being, more Republican down ballot because of Trump going to jail, like because of a lot of the things Republicans will hit Democrats with. I definitely think that that would be enough to give Republicans a narrow victory in the state. I could see John Tester winning, but as of now, like I just think that Donald Trump will bring out a lot of voters, and like I said, I still can see Democrats winning in Montana. But as of now, like with Trump's gains in the polls, I just do not see John Tester holding on, trying to overcome that. So right now, I have Republicans winning the Senate 52-48, and I do have Michigan being more competitive than most people, as well as Montana flipping, and as well as Ohio and West Virginia. But I do have Democrats holding on in most of their races. So thank you guys so much for tuning into my video. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below, as well as check out my podcast. I know I said, tell people to check it out in the beginning of the video, but please make sure to check that out. Have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.